you need three ingredients for a wildfire to occur. And the first thing is vegetation. Fire people call it fuel. What type, how much, how dry, all aspects of fuel. Second, you need ignition, human and their activities, and lightning. And third, hot, dry, windy weather. You have all three, you have a wildfire. Fire is driven by extremes. In Canada, 3% of the fires burn, 97% of the area burned. Western United States is 1% of the fires burn, 99% of the area burned. And much of this happens on a relatively small number of days of hot, dry, windy conditions. We call them spread days because these are the days that fire is actively spread. So what's going on? Well, we're seeing warmer and drier, or hotter and drier conditions in many regions of the world. And this may be because of the jet stream, and we can talk about that later, why the jet stream is playing a role. But right now we're seeing hotter and drier. And this is part of a trend that the world is getting hotter and in places drier. Other places it's wetter. We're seeing floods and excessive floods in cases. So this is part of the recipe is this warmer, drier conditions are a real issue. Now, what we're finding in our research, and we've been studying fires and climate change for over 30 years, and we're finding a warmer world translates into more fires. And people say, well, why is temperature so important? And here I'm not talking about an individual fire like the Lytton fire, where wind becomes a critical agent, or Fort McMurray. I'm talking about fire over a large area, like a province, like British Columbia, for a longer period of time, decades. So 3 reasons. Fire people seem to love 3s for some reason. But anyway, the warmer it is, the longer our fire seasons are. And we're seeing that throughout much of Canada. Our fire seasons are already a week or 2 longer than they used to be. And 2023 in particular started off with a bang. It started early with record-breaking heat. Second, the warmer it is, the more lightning we see. Now in Canada, about 50% of the fires are started by people and their activities and 50% by lightning. But lightning is responsible for about 90% of the area burned. So, we've seen a doubling of area burned in Canada since the 1970s. And my colleagues and I attribute this largely, not solely, to human-caused climate change. But human-caused fires, numbers have been going down. Area burned associated with human-caused fires has been going down. Things like education, fire bans seem to be doing their job. But lightning-caused fires have more than compensated for that because of the increase in fire activity we're seeing. So more lightning means more fire. And the third reason, probably the most important, probably the most convoluted, as the air temperature increases, the ability to suck moisture out of the fuel, and here I'm talking about forest fuels on the forest floor, cured grass, needles, leaves, it responds very quickly to the atmosphere. So this ability to dry them out increases exponentially with temperature. So unless we see more rain to compensate for this drying effect from the warming, we end up with drier fuels. And this is a critical aspect of understanding fire, because the drier the fuel, easier it is for a fire to start, easier it is for a fire to spread, and it means more fuel is available to burn, which leads to higher intensity fires that are difficult to impossible to extinguish. So a warmer world means more fire and unfortunately more smoke as well. And smoke can travel thousands of kilometers. You can be downtown Toronto, downtown New York, and the likelihood of your place burning down to a wildland fire is essentially 0. However, your life can be miserable for weeks because of wildland fire smoke from a fire 1,000 kilometers away. So it can impact many people, like it did in 2023 on the Eastern Seaboard. Millions of people were impacted significantly by fires 1,000 kilometers away. For Canada and the United States, and for other regions of the world, we can expect warmer conditions, more extreme weather, and these will lead to more fire activity and unfortunately more consequences because, as we see larger fires, more intense fires, it will bump into societal values, whether it's critical infrastructure or unfortunately communities. And we'll see more and more of this. In addition, there's more development on the landscape. There's more homes being built. There's more industry. And so a fire doesn't have to get very big before it bumps or intersects with society. So yes, we expect more in the future. Now, the second part was about, what can we do? Well, there's a couple things we can do, okay? First, a lot of what we're seeing in terms of increases is due to human-caused climate change. So the sooner we get our act together as a global society, from individuals to municipalities, to provincial and state governments, to federal governments and industry, working together to reduce greenhouse gases. So that will help. But to be more specific about fire, let's work with the three ingredients. Day-to-day weather, we really can't do much about. We will see hot, dry, windy conditions. And unfortunately, it looks like we're going to see hotter and drier and more of them in the future. Second, lightning, we can't do much about lightning either. Human-caused fires, we can do things. And as I mentioned, our track record is pretty good, but we can do better because every human-caused fire is preventable. So fire bans we use, forest closures, we don't use effectively or enough. Forest closures where there's no recreational activity, no industrial activity allowed in the forest. Very effective at stopping human-caused ignitions. And they have been used in places. California used them last year, Nova Scotia and Alberta used them this year, but unfortunately, they used them after we had fire emergency across the province. You have to use them before things happen. And I can give you an example from British Columbia. I live in Kamloops, British Columbia. Last week was a very fire-filled week. And the city of Kamloops said, we're closing our natural walking trails because the fire risk is too high and we don't need any more fires in the landscape. So kudos to them for doing that kind of activity, but it should be done at a larger scale. And how we fight fires, we seem to be reactive rather than preemptive. And we should be moving quickly. So what typically happens is within a province or jurisdiction, fire management's very good at moving resources around. And I'll use Alberta example here. So fire danger is high in Fort McMurray. They move extra resources to the Fort McMurray region, and that's great. But what happens if the situation overwhelms a province? They call CIFC, Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center, and they say, we need additional resources. Places like Quebec or Nova Scotia say, yeah, we can send resources. But when they make the phone call, it's after the fire situation has already erupted. And it takes 3 days for that firefighter or helicopter to come from Quebec to get to the fire line. That's 3 days too late. We have seen multiple occasions this fire season where we saw the fire weather forecast a week in advance saying, look out, hot, dry, windy weather, extreme conditions are coming. That's when you make the call and get additional resources. And, I propose even a national team of firefighters to be quick deployed in advance of the extreme weather. Now, people say it's expensive. Okay, yes, it is expensive. But for every dollar you spend on prevention, it usually saves you $5 to $15 down the road. And by preventing disasters like Fort McMurray and Lytton. So other people say sometimes the weather forecast is wrong. Right again. But if it's right more often than not, it more than pays for itself. Other people say it's a provincial responsibility and not a federal responsibility. And they're right. The federal government, if they create something like a FEMA for fires, earthquakes, floods, would have to work hand in glove with the provinces. But it is a concern and a responsibility of the federal government because health and safety is a responsibility of the federal government. And here we're talking about preventing disasters. And it actually saves you money by preventing the disaster rather than paying out for the disaster. So I see it as a way forward.